There is a tremendous difference between the initial claims of the goodness of all creation that we find in the early stories of Genesis, the creation stories there, and the collection of rules and regulations that will make up the book of Leviticus. These are two of the first three books of the Bible, two of the 5 books of the Torah, the Jewish law. But what a huge difference between the initial affirmation of Genesis and the restrictions you're going to find in Leviticus. In Genesis, the first of the 2 creation stories, the one that has the 7 days of creation to provide order and context for those events, the affirmation is made over and over again, and God saw that it was good. And after those 6 days of creation, the sweeping proclamation at the end, God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very good. So the Bible begins with this blanket vote of confidence and approval of everything that God has made, all of the created order. And then we come to Leviticus, where we have chapter after chapter dividing this divinely created order into 2 diametrically opposed realities. What is clean, good, and what is unclean, not good. Meat from animals with hooves can be eaten, for they are clean. Animals with cloven or split hooves, that meat cannot be eaten, that is unclean. It says so in Leviticus. Water creatures with fins and scales, they can be eaten. Those without fins and scales cannot be eaten, it says so in Leviticus. How meat is to be killed, how it is to be prepared, how it is to be eaten was governed by religious rules in Leviticus, making the product either clean or unclean by all of those stages. Pots and pans in your home could sometimes be clean, but sometimes they could be unclean, depending on how they were washed, where they were stored, and how they were used, and what ingredients were in those pots and pans. Well, the point is that in Jesus' day, Leviticus was still the law of the land as far as devout Jews were concerned. Those classifications of clean and unclean provide the background for our scripture lesson, the encounter of Philip, a newly minted apostle, and this Ethiopian. This Ethiopian is a problem on many levels. He is high in the structure of a foreign power, in fact, in charge of all the financial dealings of the queen, and therefore would be suspect, once he had left Ethiopia, a person with that kind of power and prestige. Although he has made his way up to Jerusalem to worship in the temple, he probably would not have been allowed in the temple proper. He would have been in one of the courtyards outside of the temple proper, kept at an arm's length because of his condition, his ethnicity, his nationality. And yes, there was that other problem, a huge problem, that this person was a eunuch, a castrated male. Perhaps that was the price he had to pay to qualify for this position, to be in a place of power and authority in the queen's household. Perhaps that was a decision his parents had made for him early on. And perhaps that was something that he had chosen for himself for whatever reason. But under the circumstances, clearly that state, a castrated male, would put him in the category of unclean, certainly. The laws of Leviticus would say that we should have nothing to do with him, for he was tainted, he was incomplete, he was not fit for worship in the temple at all. No matter how good a practicing Jew he could have become, he would not have been welcomed. Some are clean, acceptable in God's sight, says Leviticus. Some are unclean, unacceptable, and that's just the way it is. It's the way of clarifying the human family. Clean, unclean. Well, Philip, under orders from an angel voice, meets this unacceptable man in the wilderness road going on from Jerusalem down to Gaza. Gaza, that little strip of land that has been in the news these last couple weeks. Every day, people injured, people killed. Troublesome place. This man is struggling to understand a passage of Scripture from the book of Isaiah, a passage that we Christians now seem to say is a foreteller of the role of Jesus being the Messiah, the one who came to redeem the world. So bumping along in this chariot, Philip and this man conduct a Bible study class, an apt teacher and a willing student. The man spots some water alongside of the road, stops the chariot and said, "What's preventing me from being baptized?" "I guess nothing, there's water." So the chariot stops, they enter the water, and the Christian church accepts a brand new member of the family. No questions asked. You want to be baptized? You are part of the new fellowship called Christians, people of the way. I hope you sense what a radical story this is, and how it is really one of the foundational pieces of Scripture for us as a Christian family. There is no way this man could have ever been welcomed into full membership of the Jewish community. He was too tainted. He was too incomplete. He was too much of a problem. He had started his faith journey toward Judaism, was reading the Scriptures, got into Isaiah, but as devout as he might have become, and as conscientious as he may have been in following his faith, he was unqualified. He was unclean, could never overcome that status. However, along a dusty wilderness road, Philip, acting on behalf of the church, grants him full inclusion into the community we call the Church of Jesus Christ. An Ethiopian, meaning that perhaps he had considerable Negroid features. Not necessarily, but could be. A foreign dignitary, meaning that he could never be trusted really outside of Ethiopia. A eunuch, absolutely unclean, no exceptions. But Philip opens wide the door of God's grace, and this man joyfully jumps in the water and said, "Please baptize me. I want to be a part of this new community that is willing to accept me." Well, that was going to have some ramifications back in Jerusalem, you can be sure of that. How would they condone what had happened on the road that Philip had done for an Ethiopian eunuch? Would anyone else ever accept him as a member of the family, as a fellow Christian? Would something Philip did by himself out in the wilderness have any credentials back in Jerusalem? Would anybody say, "Yes, If he's baptized, he is one of us. For you see, that opens the whole question about the meaning of baptism and the wonder of baptism, the glorious acceptance of God's grace into which we are all invited. Baptism is our inclusion in the family, this one-time act that places us firmly within the family of God. That's what makes us kin, all of us here, to the same family, no matter what. That these baptismal waters at some time in the past have washed over us, wiping away all the distinctions that society will make and saying they don't count here. Society's distinctions do not count here. Age or income or family background or previous history, nothing is more important than the baptism which joins each of us together. You see, none of you were at a little church in St. Paul, Minnesota in the summer of 1938 when I was baptized, and you had no right to be there and contest that because you weren't there. And so whether you like it or not, I'm part of the family, part of your family. Okay? And I wasn't here for anybody's baptism seated in these seats. Not even, I would have been had Carson been here, because I baptized Carson. I know about his baptism, and I approved of that. But I didn't give approval for any of you. No. That's the radical nature of baptism. When Philip reported back to Jerusalem about some question whether or not a eunuch, Ethiopian at that, was good enough, pure enough, clean enough to be a full member, but baptism won out. In chapter 10, this story came from chapter 8. Chapter 10 of Acts, Peter, the head apostle, struggles with the same issue and declares that God has made all things clean and that eunuchs are, yes, included in the family, and so are Gentiles of every sort, every human being, circumcised or not, male, female, slave, free, no distinction. You want to be part of the family? You want to be baptized? You are in. The earliest creed that was used in the early church was just 3 words: Jesus is Lord. No creedal statements, no confessions of faith, no long memorization of 129 questions and answers of the Heidelberg Catechism. None of that. Jesus is Lord. No residency requirements, no photo ID, no written tests. Believe Jesus is Lord and you are in. And once you are in, it is incumbent upon those who are already in to say welcome. Welcome around the table. Good to have you home. And when you're in, you're rubbing shoulders with all those who got in just by believing that Jesus is Lord. Look around, we're a motley looking crew. None of us look much like anybody else. All of our stories are different. We've come from different places. Some are newbies to the faith. Some are lifelong newbie, old-timers to the faith. Doesn't make any difference. Some of us are conservatives, theologically, fiscally, politically. Some of us are liberal, theologically, fiscally, political. Some of us are in between all those distinctions, looking at people on either sides and wondering what's going on. We're all in this together. We certainly will not agree with each other on everything, and we don't need to. But we need to have enough of a common mind to create the future of this congregation. We're in this together. So, I don't think any of us want to try to dismember the family, suggest that some are not as fit as others. We don't call it clean and unclean. We call it kind of fit. Do they fit? baptized, you're in. It's kind of a strange way to build a community, that loosey-goosey. Wherever you were baptized, you're still in. You still count. It's going to take a wilderness journey maybe for some of us to get through some of the old ideas we might have had about fitness for inclusion. But when we're there, angels sing, and God says, Amen. Amen.